elsewhere in the area, kind of combining commercial and residential and schools and hospitals and even industrial in just a more compact way. And so the question from a corridor perspective and a climate change perspective, corridor, is this more a connected and connectable landscape than this, which I would say is the default. If we don't engage, that is what we'll see, which is similar to that. And, I'm trying, sincerely, it's not, derogatory about Davenport or any particular developers. This is just kind of the way the industry has unfolded across the country, not just Florida. So if we could think about how to think through, with all sorts of different stakeholder input, how to have more of this type of geographic footprint on the landscape, I think it will benefit not only the goals from the corridor perspective, but also to reduce the exposures and the sensitivities to climate change. So in conclusion, next steps, we're going to take those ideas and operationalize them to the best of our abilities in the time that we have. Recall the report is due in February, which might as well be tomorrow, but we've got a great team, and so we're going to, if you recall the 6 principal land uses and covers that I showed in the initial map, the first one is improved pasture, right? And so the way the ecologists and economists have come to think about characterizing and parsing the benefits of environment for society and environment for environment, and it's called ecosystem services, and many of you are probably really familiar with it. There's 2 or 3 other sessions here on topic, and it's a useful construct. We divide these services into provisioning and regulating, supporting, and cultural. And so we want to take a look at how we think that for each land use type and for each climate stress, say increase in heat or increase in nighttime temperatures, for example, each of the land use types and land covers might respond. And that's kind of a joint ecology, biology, economy, society question. And that's what's really fun about this type of work. Once we've done that, so it's not just for the improved pastures, we'll do the same exercise for the other land use categories. And then that, as you see in the top left, is without the corridor, what might happen in the coming decades with this massive increase in population without the corridor, and we'll repeat it with the corridor, and try and get minimally a qualitative assessment, thumbs up, thumbs down, for each of these intersections here in this table. And with that, I will end. Thank you. So, yes, we have a microphone in the middle. If you have any questions, I might put on my back.
Is it working?
Yes.
All right, good. Colin, great presentation. We're very happy to be working with you and the other co-authors on the report for the Center for Landscape Conservation Planning at the University of Florida. Obviously, there's a lot we can talk about, and we've been talking about, and looking forward to getting more into the report writing process. Two points. One is, you're right, there is some intensive development in the corridor. It's important to clarify that quite a bit of that intensive development is active mining, especially in the phosphate district in Polk County, DeSoto, and some adjacent areas in other counties. So that's something we need. That's on us to make that clarification in future maps and statistics. There is scattered residential development, and obviously roads are included because you can't have a connected network without crossing road. So all those things are included as that intensive development category in the data we provided. Part of that is because land cover data, right? We're relying on the land cover data that, especially in the north part of the state where there is trees, you don't always see the residential development. But by definition, intensive development is considered generally unsuitable to be in the corridor. It just happens because of issues with land cover data sometimes, closing gaps, narrow gaps in the corridor, including phosphate mining for specific reasons related to the integrated habitat network in Southwest Florida. There is a plan to protect and restore, a connected ecological network once post-mining, when it's all done. So we'll work on, clarifying, what is the intensive development in the corridor and why. The other thing is, I think it's really great to include those examples of how there are better patterns of development. And it sounds like it's going to be talked about elsewhere in this conference later today in a couple different sessions. But one of the things that was powerful about the early versions of the Florida 2060 work that Paul Zwick and Peggy Carr did at the University of Florida, that Mike Volk and I have taken the effort up since both Paul and Peggy have retired, is they showed in high growth places, especially they did a regional project for Southwest Florida, especially Collier County, that showed that it took very little increase in density, really modest increases in density, and redevelopment, where you're putting some of the new people that are projected to come to a county or region into areas that are already developed. Really modest increases, if there's a lot of growth projected, number of people coming, make a huge difference in the number of greenfield or green space acres needed to accommodate new development, to accommodate new people. And there is a misconception a lot of times when we talk about increased densities that it's either large lot subdivision or it's high rises, right? Mm-hmm. And there's all kinds of examples that most people, lay people, don't understand what little bit higher density looks like. And if they see examples of it, they're like, oh, that looks great, that looks fine, I would live there. But if they just hear higher densities, they have this conception of high-rise or condo towers. And that's a challenge for us to convey that small increase in density, more compact growth is really feasible, it is economically marketable, and we need to do it. Because if we're going to protect the corridor, we need more compact development in the future.
Thank you. Yes, just a very brief comment. It's on us then, as a group, to communicate that, and I think it would be really valuable. I agree, there's a spectrum. It's not binary. You have your rural divisions and then a more suburban, 1 acre lot type of arrangement like I showed there in the first card rendering. But there's any number of steps along the way towards, Manhattan. And so we gotta be clear about that. Yes, sir.
Thanks. Hi, I'm Dr. T.H. Culhane from the University of South Florida and the director of the Climate Mitigation and Adaptation Program. And my question comment comes from when I was an urban planning student getting my PhD and was taken to Curitiba in Brazil. And the model was this high density to open up green space surrounding the city, and we all hated it. And we longed to return to California, to Southern California. And our vision then, that remains my vision now that I've moved to Florida and I'm teaching here, is can we develop a sustainability sprawl that maintains the space, but by changing the culture of landscape, creates corridors like the National Wildlife Federation's Backyard Wildlife Program, but says to a certain neighborhood that the wildlife has a right of way and has to be able to come through all of these big front lawns and back lawns, so you can't have lawns. You have to have native vegetation, you have to have pathways, you have to have shade structures, you have to have feeding stops. Is that a possibility so we could, A, retrofit what we've already got, that is this pattern you showed, not even deal with the political consequences of trying to get people moving to Florida, their dream of having space around them, but saying that space is wild space that has to be shared. And do we see that in places? I don't think any place, the place people went to yesterday, people reported on, Babcock Ranch, all these, they still maintain the sort of lawn phenomenon with a few little native plantings. Is there any example we can point to here in the States of a sprawl that wildlife would find inviting?
That's a great question, and I would take that as, there's a note taker here. That's a charge would be maybe to look to a place like Boulder, Colorado, and we could talk about a few others where you may have some real high quality and intentional design efforts that incidentally I think are usually the product of a lot of stakeholder input, kind of bottom-up multi-stakeholder consultations and solicitations. And otherwise, you know, if you don't have buy-in, you know, you might live to regret it. My brief experience with the corridor is, wow, you know, look at just this conference and who's here and who's been here in terms of a social movement that is drawing from a pretty broad array of stakeholders. So if anywhere is likely to succeed in that type of effort, I feel pretty good about our prospects.
Thank you.
We have, I don't know, 3 minutes more for questions? Yes, sir.
I actually just want to follow up on that last comment, which I appreciated. I did a study a few years ago, and I haven't published it because I'm looking for funding to add some replicate landscapes. But I looked at bird communities in high-density developments, low-density developments, and natural areas randomly selected within the same general landscape of South Central Florida. And what I found is that the bird communities of the low-density developments, however sprawling they are, were much more similar to the natural areas than were the high-density developments. But within the category of low-density development, exactly what was suggested, the more native vegetation that was retained, the more closely the bird community resembled the natural area. So I do think we could do a lot contributing to the corridor by just encouraging growth of native vegetation instead of lawns in these low-density developments.
Well, I like that comment. I've actually published on lawn and lawn care, and it brings me back to an earlier day. That's one of the comments I made with that picture of the you know, low-density development is it's kind of a monoculture.
Yeah, that's the
It
problem.
doesn't have to be a monoculture. And
Right.
so we want to ask the question, you know, does a low-density landscape have to and always be not as good? And if you have a low-density landscape, I think native vegetation is how you characterize it, but it's not a monoculture that's kind of intensively cultivated through a lot of nitrogen and water. It might be effective for the types of goals of the corridor.
Yeah.
With a low density. And so, you know, this type of scratching beneath the surface, I think, will help us as a community identify ways, a kind of a menu or a library of ways where the corridor might be able to successfully unfold in different parts of the state, even if it might look a little different, tailored to local conditions. Yes, sir.
Hello. My name's Lance. I'm with the Museum of Discovery and Science in Fort Lauderdale. We work a lot with Culhane on our Hope for Resilience education. But speaking on the education aspect, I'm wondering if you wouldn't mind sharing your perspective on avenues of action, right? How do we get developers or the people that are going to buy these houses, right, to want more compact development, right? How do we educate them on what's the best, what is the best for wildlife, what is the best for ecosystem services? So what are those areas of low hanging fruit? How do we educate and advocate on a bigger scale, right, outside of zoning?
Yeah, I guess I would envision a multi-pronged approach where we're talking the grand we, to folks in the legislature, simultaneously with people in different communities at the kind of town board zoning level, and other types of local level community input. And then there's a regional perspective as well, in multi-city or even multiple counties. There's the regional planning commissions network that I think is less vigorous these days than it used to be in this state. But there are these avenues to engage with, and I think providing some illustrations of what could be is a very powerful way to animate conversation, and then to solicit input of visions for what the landscape might look like from the various communities. Because we don't know necessarily a priori, we're not that clever. There's plenty of local knowledge and interest that I think it has to be engaged and solicited. And again, my maybe naive vision, but the corridor, successful corridor would unfold and look different in different parts of the state. This is a big state and it's 18 million acres. It may well look different in different places, but still function in a way that's consistent with the corridor goals. One more minute?
I've already asked, but I ask another question, which is some of the work that we're doing, and many of my students are actually in the audience here. And we teach a course called Envisioning Sustainability, and we have a production workshop launching in the spring, where we try to get sustainabilitists, as we call them, to embrace the tools for that pre-visualization. So they're doing gaming technology and video production, trying to show alternative futures. Where would that local vision you're talking about best be parked? Should it be in museums of the discovery? Is there public access television? If you wanted to show every community's 3D walk-through, fly-through, play-through model of alternative futures so that people could experience it, how would you get that out to the public? Because our students will be developing those. That's their task for the next semester. But then it could just sit there on a server and then nobody ever knows.
I wish I had a succinct, definitive answer, but I would just say these days, there's never been a better time to try and be communicating with billions of people at low cost. This reminds me of the work that I and my colleagues have been doing on the sea level rise side of things in Southeast Florida, where there are any number of visualizations, static, crayon, or 3D digital, that have been brought to bear to different types of focus group environments and decision maker consultations and evening, put on the VR goggles and
That's what we do.
see what sea level rise looks like for Main Street. So there's experience with that, and I know elsewhere in San Francisco and lots of places are doing that type of thing. I think that's a successful enough model to look towards. The good thing about what you're describing is there's an aspirational and inspirational side that the Rising Waters doesn't have.
Yeah.
It's a little terrifying and confusing, but it's all part of the conversations that we need to have.
Thank you.
Great. Well, you all have been fantastic. I think it's 10:50 and that's time to break, so thank you.